My name is Monica Rosen, and I'm 29 years old. If anyone had asked me that morning what happiness looked like, I would have said it looked exactly like today, sunlight slipping through lace curtains, the scent of lilies, and the quiet thrill in my chest as I buttoned my wedding dress. The room buzzed softly with motion. My best friend Mia hummed as she pinned the last curl of my hair into place. Cold feet, she teased, her voice light, but her eyes searching. I smiled at my reflection, the white silk, the delicate pearl earrings, the calm in my face that didn't feel entirely real. Not even close, I said. The lie came out smooth practiced. Mia laughed. You're the first bride I've ever seen who isn't trembling. I shrugged. Maybe I used up all my nerves during the planning. The truth was, my hands were steady because they had to be. I'd always been that way, control first, emotions later. Outside, the church bells began to chime, distant and melodic. Each ring felt like a countdown. 5 minutes, Monica Brenda, the coordinator, poked her head in with professional warmth. He's ready. He looks like he might faint. I laughed softly. That makes one of us. As soon as she left, Mia squeezed my shoulders. You deserve this, after everything you really do. Her words settled over me, like a blessing I didn't quite believe. When the doors opened, the world turned gold. Rows of familiar faces blurred behind tears and candlelight. At the end of the aisle, Ronald stood waiting, dark suit, nervous smile. His tie was slightly crooked, and I loved that imperfection more than the perfection surrounding us. My father's arm was steady beneath my hand. Proud of you, sweetheart, he whispered. I nodded, forcing a smile. But as my eyes met Ronald's, something inside me flickered. A tremor, like a string, snapping quietly in a distant room. His smile didn't reach his eyes. Still, I walked forward, step by step, each one echoing through the silent church until I was standing beside him, his hand in mine, warm but trembling. The ceremony began. Pastor Miller's voice droned softly about unity, love, and devotion. I tried to focus on his words, but Ronald's thumb twitched nervously against my palm. He wouldn't look at me. When the pastor reached that familiar phrase, if anyone can show just cause why these two should not be joined, I heard the audience chuckle faintly. It was supposed to be a pause of joy, of formality. But Ronald's grip tightened, then loosened. And in that fragile silence, he leaned closer and whispered almost apologetically, I can't do this. My heart belongs to someone else. The words didn't echo, they detonated. Quietly, inwardly. I felt my heartbeat stop like someone had pressed pause on the world. My first instinct was disbelief, a trick, a joke, a dream. But then I saw the truth in his eyes, the sorrow, the guilt, the finality. A murmur rippled through the guests. The pastor froze mid-breath. I heard myself ask, barely above a whisper, What did you just say? Ronald's lips trembled. I'm sorry, Monica. I tried, I really did, but I didn't let him finish. Something cold, ancient, and precise took over inside me, the part of me that refused to break in front of anyone. I turned to the pastor and reached for the microphone. My hand was steady, terrifyingly steady. It seems I said my voice calm, almost detached, the wedding is off. The silence that followed felt alive, thick, pulsing, suffocating. I turned the microphone toward Ronald. He has something to say to all of you. He stared at me, eyes wide like a man watching his own reflection shatter. But I didn't wait. I stepped back, lifted my dress slightly, and walked down the aisle. Each click of my heels on the stone floor echoed like a gavel. I didn't look at my parents. I didn't look at Mia. The only thing ahead was the great wooden doors open, blinding with sunlight. When I stepped outside, the world was too bright, too loud. The warmth hit my skin like punishment. My body trembled for the first time, but my face stayed still. Inside, people would be whispering, gasping, comforting him. But out here, it was just me. The bride who didn't cry, the woman who walked away, and the silence that followed her was absolute. The sunlight outside the church had felt blinding. But once I got into the car and shut the door, everything went dark. Not because of the tint on the windows, but because it was like the world itself had dimmed. My hands rested on the steering wheel, cold and still. I could still feel the shape of Ronald's fingers where they'd held mine moments before he said it. My heart belongs to someone else. It played on a loop in my head, too cruel, too clean. For a long time, I didn't move. I just stared at the bouquet lying on the passenger seat. Ivory roses and tiny white orchids, perfect and useless. One of the petals had fallen curling against the leather. I watched it like it was something sacred dying. Eventually, I turned the key and drove. Not home, not really. Just forward. When I reached our apartment, no, my apartment, I parked outside and sat for another 5 minutes. The quiet hum of the engine was the only sound. I imagined what people were saying inside the church. That poor girl, how humiliating. She must have known. But I hadn't known, and that made it worse. Inside the apartment looked like a museum of the life we'd been building, 2 wine glasses still in the sink from last night's rehearsal dinner, Toast, his jacket on the back of the couch, the scent of his cologne faint in the air. I stood in the doorway, staring. Then I walked to the closet, found a box, and started packing his things, one by one. His sneakers, his razor, his favorite coffee mug that said, "World's okayest fiancé." I didn't cry. I didn't throw anything. I just packed. Every folded shirt was a memory I refused to replay. Every sound the tape sealing the cardboard bending became a kind of heartbeat. It was mechanical, methodical, like I was cleaning a wound. Around sunset, I heard the front door open. Monica. It was Mia. Her voice trembled, but her footsteps were hesitant, like she was afraid to step into this new version of me. I didn't turn around. I'm in the bedroom. She walked in, stopped when she saw the half-packed boxes. "Oh my God, you're already cleaning," I said simply. "Monica, slow down. You don't have to do this tonight." "I do." She exhaled, stepping closer. "You just got humiliated in front of 200 people and you're folding shirts." I set another stack of his clothes in the box and met her eyes. "I'm removing evidence." Her face softened. "Honey, you don't have to be strong right now." "I'm not being strong," I said quietly. "I'm being practical. There's a difference." Mia sat down on the edge of the bed, watching me with that cautious empathy only old friends know how to use. "What do you need?" "Do you want me to call your parents?" "Or maybe no calls, no messages, no pity." She hesitated. "Monica, you're allowed to fall apart." I sealed the last box with a strip of tape that sounded like thunder in the silence. "I'll fall apart when it's useful." She didn't argue after that. For a long time, the only sound was the faint hum of the city outside and the gentle crinkle of tissue paper as I wrapped the last framed photo, the one of us laughing on that windswept beach where he'd proposed. I turned it face down before putting it in the box. Later, after Mia left, I made tea but didn't drink it. The clock ticked. My phone buzzed and buzzed, his name flashing on the screen, Ronald calling. Then it stopped. Then buzzed again. Then his mother's name. Then mine, Mom. I powered it off. In the silence that followed, I sat on the couch, staring at the blank television screen. My reflection looked strange, mascara-smudged hair, undone dress, slightly wrinkled. I didn't look like a bride anymore. I looked like someone whose entire life had been erased in a single sentence. But somewhere beneath the numbness, a small, sharp thought began to form, cold and steady. If he destroyed the life I built around him, then I'll build one that doesn't need anyone at all. I stood, walked to the kitchen, poured the untouched tea down the drain. The water steamed against the porcelain sink, curling upward like smoke, like something leaving. And for the first time that day, I exhaled. It's strange how quickly a life can change when you stop waiting for someone to come back. 6 months. That's how long it took to erase the last trace of Ronald from my home and from my heartbeat. The first few weeks after the wedding. I barely slept. Nights blurred into mornings filled with the mechanical rhythm of fixing things that couldn't be fixed, unsubscribing from joint accounts, returning gifts, deleting photos. Every task was both a cut and a stitch. But then something shifted. One morning I woke up and realized I hadn't thought about him in 3 days. The absence of pain felt suspicious, like silence after a storm. That was the moment I knew I was ready to rebuild. I found the email by accident, a newsletter ad for a UX design boot camp I'd subscribed to years ago and forgotten about. 3 months, one new career, one new life. The tagline felt personal. I still had the honeymoon fund sitting untouched in my account. A cruel irony, money meant for a dream that never happened. So I used it for something better me. The program was intense, 12-hour days, endless projects. I sat in front of glowing screens long after midnight, my apartment silent except for the clack of my keyboard and the low hum of the refrigerator. But it felt good. No, it felt alive. Each new skill, wireframing, prototyping, debugging, became a tiny act of revenge. Not against Ronald, but against the version of myself who once believed her worth was tied to someone's promise. Mia visited one evening, a takeout bag in one hand and a raised eyebrow. "Do you even go outside anymore?" "I have a final project due," I said, not looking up from my laptop. You're glowing blue, she muttered, like a haunted computer. I laughed. It sounded foreign, but nice. It's called progress. She studied me quiet for a moment. You're not angry anymore, are you? I paused. No, I think I skipped anger and went straight to clarity. Mia smirked. Well, clarity looks good on you. By the time I graduated, I wasn't the same person who'd stood at that altar. My hair was shorter, my shoulders straighter, my smile rarer but more honest. When I got the email offering me a remote design position at a fintech startup, I read it twice, then once more, just to feel the words sink in. I moved into a new apartment. All white walls, clean lines, and soft light. No ghosts, no shared memories, just mine. The first night there, I opened a single box I'd saved, not his things, but mine. Old sketches, college notebooks, a Polaroid of me at 20, laughing with no makeup and no fear. I pinned that photo above my desk. It wasn't nostalgia. It was a reminder you were someone before him, and you're someone again now. Work became my sanctuary. I built interfaces that made sense, unlike people, unlike love. Each project was a puzzle with rules, patterns, and outcomes that could be predicted. Order in a world that had betrayed me with chaos. And yet, sometimes late at night, I'd catch myself wondering if he ever thought about me. The thought would flicker like static, then vanish before it could hurt. Because truthfully, I didn't want him to. I wanted him to remember me not as the woman who begged or broke, but as the woman who walked away without a single tear. A month later, Mia stopped by, again wine bottle in hand. She looked around at my spotless, minimalist living room and whistled. God, Monica, it's like you're living inside a catalog. That's the point, I said, half smiling. No clutter, no distractions. She poured 2 glasses and raised hers, to rebirth. I clinked mine against hers, to silence. We drank. The wine was sweet and sharp. And for the first time in months, I realized I wasn't pretending anymore. I was fine. Maybe not happy yet, but fine was enough. Because the foundation had finally settled, and I was ready to build on it. It happened on an ordinary Thursday afternoon, the kind of day that doesn't warn you it's bringing ghosts back to your door. I was deep in a design sprint meeting when my phone lit up. Mia. 3 missed calls. Then a text. Call me. You're going to want to hear this. I sighed, excused myself, and stepped out onto the balcony. The city stretched below glass motion noise. None of it had anything to do with me anymore. When I called, she picked up instantly. Monica, it's him. My heart didn't jump. It barely stirred. Ronald. Yes, she said, voice trembling with equal parts fury and disbelief. He's God, Monica. He's been scammed. I leaned against the railing, expression unreadable. Scammed. By that woman he left you for, Camilla or Camille or whatever her name was. Turns out she's a con artist. She drained his savings, maxed his credit cards, disappeared. He's ruined. The silence on my end was so complete that Mia's breath crackled through the phone. I thought you'd want to know, she said gently. I looked out at the skyline sunlight catching on the mirrored windows of high-rises, making everything look like it was burning. Finally, I said, then I suppose the lesson found its teacher. Mia let out a low whistle. That's it. That's all you're going to say. What else is there? I don't know. Maybe something human. Anger, satisfaction. A tiny evil laugh. I smiled faintly. No. It's not worth the energy. That night, I sat in front of my laptop, half listening to the hum of the city outside. My cursor hovered over a photo folder labeled Our Engagement. For the first time since that day, I opened it. The images felt like artifacts from a different lifetime, us on the beach. Me laughing him, holding me from behind. My eyes looked soft, his full of a kind of practiced devotion. I studied that smile now. It was hollow, like a reflection someone rehearsed for a mirror. One by one, I deleted the photos. Not in a burst of anger. Slowly, deliberately. Click. Confirm. Empty trash. The sound of the deletion chime was oddly satisfying, a soft digital sigh, final and irreversible. The next morning, Mia dropped by with croissants and gossip as usual. You're trending, she announced, setting her phone on the counter. I raised an eyebrow. Trending. She showed me a local post on social media. Ronald's ex-fiancé had apparently made her profile public again. There were comments, screenshots, people dissecting the scandal like vultures around a carcass. I'm sorry, Mia said softly. I didn't mean to show you this. It's fine, I said. I just hope he learned something from it. She gave me a look. You're not angry at all, I shook my head. Anger means I still care. I don't. She exhaled and leaned back. You know, I used to think you were too calm about everything, but now I get it. You don't just survive, you outgrow. That evening, I poured myself a glass of white wine and sat by the window. The skyline was the same lights flickering like pulse beats. But I was different. Everything that had once been tied to him had been severed one deliberate cut at a time. He had chosen chaos. I had chosen quiet. And between the two, only one of us found peace. I lifted my glass, not in celebration, not in revenge, but in recognition. Because there's a kind of victory in refusing to look back. The first message came 3 months later. I was in the middle of a morning meeting when my phone buzzed with a notification from an unknown number. The preview read, Monica, it's me. I don't even know where to start. I'm sorry. Please, can we talk? My eyes stayed fixed on the monitor in front of me. A dashboard of color-coded design metrics. Clean. Predictable. The opposite of him. I muted the notification and went back to work. Later during lunch, curiosity won a brief guilty battle. I opened the message. He said he'd made a terrible mistake, that he thought about me every day, that he didn't deserve forgiveness but hoped I'd listen. I didn't reply. I didn't even feel anger, just a strange detachment like reading a story about someone else's heartbreak. I deleted the thread and blocked the number. It wasn't courage, it was clarity. 2 days later, my mother called. Her voice was soft, tentative, the same tone she used when telling me bad news as a child. Sweetheart. I just spoke to Ronald's mother. I sighed. Mom, she says he's not doing well. He lost his job, his apartment. She's worried. He told her he still loves you. The word love made my jaw tighten. Mom, what happened to him isn't my problem. I know, she rushed to say. It's just his mother begged me to ask if you'd consider talking to him. Closure, maybe. I stared out the window. The afternoon light stretched long and gold across my desk, touching the edge of my keyboard. Closure isn't a conversation, Mom. It's a decision. There was a pause, then a quiet sigh. You're stronger than I ever was. No, I said softly. Just done. The second message came through email this time from an address I didn't recognize, but the subject line gave it away. I need to explain. I hovered over it, didn't click, didn't open, just deleted it unread. The digital world was full of doors, but I'd already locked mine. A week later, another text from a new number. This one wasn't apologetic, it was raw, desperate. So that's it. You get to move on and pretend none of this happened. You're heartless, Monica. You think deleting me erases what we had. I read it twice. Then quietly I whispered to the empty room. Yes, it does. Block. Delete. Silence. That night I couldn't sleep. Not because of the messages they didn't hurt, but because of how little they mattered now. It hit me then I had built something stronger than revenge. Indifference. True, beautiful, terrifying indifference. No amount of pleading or guilt could reopen a wound that had already scarred over. I stood in front of the mirror, the same one I'd used the morning of my wedding. Back then, I'd seen a woman trying to look perfect. Now I saw someone whole, steady eyes clear, shoulders unbowed. Forgiveness didn't mean softness. It meant reclaiming peace. When Mia dropped by the next morning, I told her about the messages. Her eyes went wide. You're kidding. After everything, I guess ghosts don't like being ignored. She snorted. So what did you do? Nothing. That's the point. Mia smiled slow and proud. You know that's worse for him than any revenge you could have planned. I smiled back. Good. Because silence I'd learned was the loudest kind of freedom. 1 year later, if someone had told me then, the day I walked out of that church, that I'd one day wake up with a smile before sunrise, I would have laughed. Or maybe cried, but now both felt unnecessary. The light in my apartment was soft, warm, and kind. My plants by the window were thriving. The coffee machine purred quietly as I poured my first cup. There were no traces of anyone else's toothbrush beside mine, no echoes of footsteps that didn't belong. Just peace, simple, earned. I had built a life that fit me perfectly. I was now lead UX designer at a small but ambitious startup. My days were full of purpose pixels and people creative chaos that I actually loved. My team had become a kind of family, the loud, quirky kind that laughed through stress and celebrated tiny victories. During lunch breaks, we'd joke about bad clients, ridiculous color palettes, and the irony of designing order out of human messiness. If that wasn't poetic justice, I didn't know what was. That morning, I was in the middle of a team video call. Maya, our product manager, was animatedly ranting about a last-minute client change. Who asked for a complete redesign the day before launch, she cried, throwing up her hands. Everyone laughed, including me. A real laugh, not the careful, polite one I'd once used to make someone else comfortable. Then in the corner of my laptop screen, a notification blinked. New email. Please, sender Ronald Matthews. For a moment, time didn't stop. It simply slowed like a breath before exhale. I didn't open it, but the preview line said enough. Monica. I have no one else to turn to. I lost everything. I miss you. I still love. The words faded mid-sentence as the message preview cut off. The team's laughter echoed faintly through my earbuds. I looked at the glowing monitor, my reflection faint in the glass. And then without hesitation, I moved the cursor. Select, delete. No recycle bin, no second thoughts. Gone. After the call ended, I stood by the window sipping the last of my coffee. The city stretched wide and golden below, alive, imperfect, unbothered. It hit me then that freedom doesn't announce itself. It doesn't come with fanfare or closure or poetic revenge. It arrives quietly on a morning like this when you realize you haven't thought about him in months. Not with love, not with hate, not at all. Ronald wasn't a wound anymore. He was just an old story with no pages left to turn. I opened my laptop again, the camera flickering to life for another call. My reflection appeared on the screen, older, stronger, real. All right, I said, smiling to my team. Where were we? Let's talk about the Q4 launch. And as I spoke, I caught my own eyes in the reflection. For the first time in years, I saw a woman who didn't need closure because she'd built a new beginning.